Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this time management 10 best practices little session that we have in the success community. I think you guys are going to really like it. We're actually also recording this session for people in the success community who cannot make it because, yes, we got people in different time zones, all the way in South Africa, US, Canada, Europe, you name it. We got people that most of the time consume the content later on rather than now. Hamish, you're obviously joining us from New South Wales, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Absolutely.
It's good to see you
Nice
again.
to see you, Ron.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for joining in. What I'll be doing, for those that are already joining live, like yourself, Hamish, I'll be uploading a little file which is basically the one that I'll be taking you through right now, so that you can easily download it and even print it later on. You don't have to take everything in notes. It's a bit easier to do it this way. So you should have it there right now in the, basically the chat. Did you find that one?
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, for the time being, what I'll do is I'll ask you just to mute yourself until later on. We always have room for Q&A. If there is any questions or comments or any ideas that you'd like to share, we're happy to take them. Other than that, we're going to work through the one-page document here, which I think you're really going to like it. Over the years, I've been privileged to work with Brian Tracy, one of the time management gurus in the world. I spent actually 4 days in his office with him. I've had dinner with him and Barbara, his wife, in San Diego. And I've been very fortunate to work with him 6 years in the organization as a local representative in Australia. And so I've done a lot of time management workshops with him and also various others gurus. And I find that sometimes it gets a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of things you could do, should do, you want to do it, but you don't have time, or you don't get to it, or you forget about it. And I thought, if I were to really condense everything I've learned into 2 pages, what would it look like? Well, this is exactly what I'm bringing to you today. And the idea is that I bring it to you in about 30 odd minutes or so, AKA I use the time well with you, that we then also spend some time on Q&A. Anything you have, anything you'd like to clarify, anything like that, we just go through it together, after which we call it a day and you can go back to your busy lives. That's basically the agenda for today. Obviously, again, a reminder, if you watch this replay, let me know if you'd like the slides, or let's say the 2-pager here. I'm happy to share it with you as added value in the success community as a member. All right, let's just first get our hands dirty. Time management. We all have 24 hours in a day, right? But some people really use that time very productively, whilst others don't. It's true, right? And so the challenge is, how come is it that certain people have developed $50,000 habits, meaning they earn $50,000 a year because of the habits they formed that only make them that much money? Others have gone on to, develop $100,000 habits. Others, again, have developed $500,000 habits in terms of income that they earn a year. Are these people better, smarter? No, they're not. Have they got a certain skin color, certain religion, certain cultural heritage? No, they don't. They basically, you can find them everywhere and anywhere. The only thing that is the common denominator that translates into bigger the results or less results is the way they use time. We can be very productive with time. We can also flounder through time. We can spend time and we can invest time. So I always like to say time is not money. Yeah. We sometimes say time is money, but it's not true, because $1 spent on the wrong thing, we can earn back as business owners, as salespeople, as business development managers, and the like. You can always earn back money spent on the wrong thing, but you can't earn back your time. An hour spent on the wrong thing is forever gone. You can't get it back. And so we got to be more ferocious with time, in my opinion. If we really think about, well, what's important, what's not? Clarify what that looks like so that you know what to say yes to and know what to say no to. We all procrastinate, but the question is, what do we procrastinate on? Do we procrastinate on high value activities and tasks, which is probably not a good idea? Or do we procrastinate on the low value activities and tasks, which is a good idea? It's okay to say, I didn't get to that yet because there was other more important stuff that I focused on first. Always know what to know, how to prioritize. And so time management really is knowing what to prioritize. And I'm not here to say, I'm definitely not here to teach you how to suck eggs. I'm not here to say to you what's important or what's not important. That's your personal decision. What I will be doing here with you is guiding you in terms of how to learn, how to prioritize what is important and what is not based on your goals, your current situation, where you want to get to in the future, and the sorts of role or line of business that you're in right now. That's basically where it's coming from. So it's learning you how to use a method whilst you have to come up with the content, if that makes sense, right? So the first things first, if you look at that page or those 2 pages that I got prepared for you, is create your ideal work week. It's the first one that I wanted to put in front of you. I created this concept as almost like a success blueprint. All of us have the innate opportunity to come up with a blueprint that works a treat for you in your business, in your role, to really fully optimize all the opportunities that are given to you and therefore become highly productive. Now, what does that mean? It's almost like McDonald's has a system to be successful as a franchisee, as does any great franchise model. To be a great financial planner, there's certain things you do and there's certain things you don't do. To be a great engineer, there's a success formula. If you want to become a Warren Buffett, there's systems to investing wisely. Yeah. So the idea is, if there is systems to do anything good in the world, well, then you could think about, well, what would my system personally look like to run a highly efficient, tight-knit system in terms of my time management per week? Now, what does that mean for me? I created a success blueprint that you will see basically gives you a bit of an idea that my Mondays are specifically allocated to planning, to kickstarting the team, and to make sure that everything is lined up for a great, successful week. That's my Mondays. Do I do client meetings then? No, I don't. Do I do prospecting? No, I don't. I plan my week. I organize everything. I schedule things, and I make sure that the team is off to a flying start. That's what I do Mondays. That also means that my client meetings are done on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And for example, in the next office behind me here, I have somebody who helps me with client appointments, and she sets them for me. And guess what? She knows that she's got to factor them in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, not of the other days. Because what I like to do, it's one of the golden principles in time management, is to put the things of the right nature, the same nature, sorry, back to back, to create efficiency, to create momentum, and to really get into the zone. So for example, if you have your first coffee meeting at 8:30 in the morning, it's a good idea to keep these things going all the way till the end of the day, because the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more efficient you get with the amount of time you use. The same also applies in terms of admin. Any admin jobs, which you could break down in, for example, invoicing or social media planning, content planning. You basically create big chunks of time. You put them into your diary up front, and it's set on autopilot because, you know, every Monday you do this, every Tuesday you do this, every Wednesday you do something else again. And so it's set and forget. And it's creating the efficiencies with back-to-back meetings of the same nature. So if you have, for example, 2 hours between 1 and 3 p.m. on Wednesdays afternoon, you would do the same activity, for example, client calls outbound during your 1 to 3 chunk of time. So you chunk things up, you block it together, you put it together to create energy efficiencies. So this is, first of all, your ideal work week. You think about what sort of success blueprint works for me in my business to help me get somewhere. To give you an example, from a sales perspective, we all, have something to sell. And whether that is a solution, a product, a service, whatever it might be, it will typically be such that your ideal client represents a certain dollar value. Let's just say that an ideal client is worth $5,000 per year, recurring. Okay, $5,000. If you want to have $40,000 weeks, then you got to think, well, how many meetings do I need to be able to reach my target? And so it's really about engineering a success formula for yourself. I know that for me to achieve my goals in my business, I need about 6 meetings a week, 2 of which were referral partners, 4 of them with clients and prospects. And out of that, I want to translate that into 2 new proposals for new business so that I can achieve my targets every week, year in, year out. That's the success formula. I know my numbers. What are your numbers? What does it need to look like? Once again, create your ideal work week is point number 1, which again, you can find on the sheets here. Number 2 is schedule high value activities in your calendar in advance. Kind of already started talking about that. It's just carving out the things that are really important to you. But what I want to do is now zoom in from a little different perspective, because some of you guys who will be watching this will be either a leader, will be either in sales or client contact, or you might be in customer service or anything like this. Well, all of this have probably a different ideal work week. They all have certain valuable activities that are more valuable to them than they are to others. AKA, as a leader, if you have a team, your number one thing, or one of your number one things, should be to take time to steer your team as a group and to steer the individuals in your team separately. That is one of your key things. So my first thing that I would always ask as a coach to you, show me your diary, and where do you have as a leader those times already carved out in your diary? Because unless it gets scheduled, it won't get done. And so it's important that you have it. I also like the idea that you got a repetitive cycle, which means that you and your team know that this particular team meeting is sacred. So everybody frees up that time, for example, early in the week on Mondays, to start all on a great foot. Know what is important that week, what are the priorities, and clear out any distractions or anything that are potential obstacles early in the week so that it doesn't slow you down as a team. Those sorts of things is important from a leadership perspective. Sales, guess what? Unless you schedule time with people that might need your services and can pay for it, again, you won't get the sales, first of all. So know what your number one thing is, given the role you're in. And of course, if you are like me, a business owner, sometimes wearing different hats, then you also know that you got a few different activities that you got to prioritize. And again, set them in your carve them out in your diary in advance, because otherwise there's a law that says I think it's called Parkinson's law, which means that whatever time you don't fill with high value activities will automatically be filled with trivia. And trivia costs us money. It costs us time, and it costs us valuable energy. Ultimately, time management is self-management, energy management, and it all translates in productivity or non-productivity. Now, with that being said, set time aside strategically to perform activities in line with your number one thing, so that at least if you only have time for that one thing, that at least that gets done before anything else. It's super important. I think sometimes people say, I didn't get to this. Well, I'm sorry. If it really is the number one thing, you should not make any excuse not to get to it. It should get done. The number one thing is the number one thing. That's why you want to be clear about what is and what isn't the number one thing. So as teams, I always encourage for teams to have this debate and managers to sit down with their people to clarify in that role what is important and what is not, what should be prioritized and what can be procrastinated on. And if you have had that conversation, it's clear, you know what success looks like. And that's important that you are on the same page. Number 3 is do guided meditations to channel your energy and attract success in the morning. See, the thing is, just like physical activity, I mean, I know that Hamish likes his cycling. I like my running and swimming, and probably will get to my cycling again sometime soon so that I can do my triathlon. But one of the key things that I've learned in the last few weeks is there's so many different ways of doing meditation. And guess what? There's this one type of meditation that I personally feel is just something that would be too silly to give up on. I'll give you actually an example on the sheets. They're not mine. I don't have any referral commission if you go and buy these things. I think they're about 39 Australian dollars to buy a whole set. They're worth it. I'm doing it religiously every single weekday. And when I do, I notice the difference in terms of my productivity that day. I also know when I skipped it, just because we sometimes want to cut corners, I noticed the difference and the lack of productivity that day. So the thing is, you and I, we all choose what we do with our time. These meditations, 10 minutes a day, I certainly would recommend you do them well, because they make a difference. They're called Ray Behan's Solfeggio meditations. And once again, the link is in the sheets. You will find that when you do this, it boosts your thinking. It opens up your creative cortex. It allows you to access what we call the executive centers in the brain. But more importantly, it's not just your thinking, it's actually creating a beautiful synergy between your head and your heart. And we all know that when we're talking about goal achievement, not even goal setting, but goal achievement, it's really critical, as Napoleon Hill back in the days said, that you got to see it in your head, feel it in your heart. You got to believe it, that you can achieve it. Only then you can achieve anything. It's something kind of in those words that you said, what man can conceive and believe, he can achieve. That's exactly what it means. These meditations are made to help you do it. So again, it's a big plug-in for these guys, these legends, masterpieces there. Number 4, write down your major goals in all areas daily. Here's the thing. There's 6 major areas in life. Different experts, different gurus call them different things. But really, if you boil them down, there's 6 major facets. I call them, it's the mental game, it's a physical game, it's an emotional game, it's a relational game, it's a financial game, and it's a spiritual game. All 6 areas there unfold for you. And what I see that very successful people tend to do is that they know very clearly what number 1 goal they have in each one of the 6 areas over a period of time. Now, if you know, for example, that spiritually, you want to become a highly influential business leader, or you want to be somebody who's a change maker in society and even maybe at the world at large, that could be a spiritual goal of yours. Then you also might, cherish really big, wildly wealthy goals that will make you financially wealthy well beyond your wildest imagination. You might, want to have a dream life with your partner, with your spouse, and not just go with an average thing where you both are physically there, but really you're not really there together. There's average and there's great. I personally like having a soulmate, and I do. And we obviously got to put things, time and energy into that relationship in order for it to thrive, like anything else in life. Then, of course, your mental, your emotional, and your physical well-being. Again, unless you set goals in those areas, you cannot hit a target that you can't see. So it's important that you clarify what that looks like. And I always encourage people to write down their goals in the personal, present, and positive tense. Basically create it as a positive affirmation. I'll share some examples on how that sounds like. It always starts with I. It always is in the present tense. So the next thing is a verb. So for example, I make, I earn, I run, I swim, I ride, I own, I build, I create, I hire, I grow. You get the gist. It's all personal, present tense. Next, it's got to be actually something positive, as in, I build a great business. I grow my team. I become financially wealthy, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, you set a deadline for you to achieve it. For example, my mission sounds like I help 2 billion people with business, professional, personal, and financial growth by 2043. Now, I've proclaimed this to the world. This is one of my goals. It's one of my longer term visions. It's a 20-year goal that I'm working towards. and it makes me accountable, and it also makes me choose my actions and prioritize things that help me get there over things that take me away from that, if that makes sense. And so this is the sort of things you want to do. You want to write them as if they're already there. That's why you write in the personal tense. But you got to make them also positive so that they are not sounding like I quit smoking or I lose weight. Nobody likes to lose. So from a language perspective, be very subtle in terms of how you use language, because losing is not great language to use as a positive affirmation. It's actually negative. So rather than saying I lose 20 kilos, you could say I weigh X amount of kilos by such and such time. That's a positive affirmation, and that helps you to give a positive command to your brain that your brain will accept as a command, and it will bring everything into motion to make that a reality sooner or later. That's what it's about. So personal, present, positive tense. That's how you write your major goals down in all 6 areas of life. And I highly recommend you write them down daily. Why would you do that daily? Let's be honest. We all get distracted. We all forget stuff. We all sometimes can, let's say, be prone to what I call the shiny object syndrome. Something flashy looks really interesting, and you just drop everything and you go there. To make sure that you always keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on the prize. You got to remind yourself of what's important. So one of my best practices early in the day is that you start your day, yes, with meditation, but also with you reminding yourself of what's really important to you in all 6 areas, in the near future and in the distant future. Because unless you tell yourself what's important, you're going to prioritize in line with other things rather than those things. And so prioritizing is just about knowing what success looks like in the near future and the distant future for you, not for someone else. Okay, are we good so far with that? 4 so far, yeah? Let's now go to number 5. 5 is eat that frog during your first hour of power. As you've basically done a little bit of physical activity, you've done your meditation, and you're walking into the office ready to seize the day, what you want to do is to be clear about what is the frog. Now, Brian Tracy created or written a international best-selling book called Eat That Frog. Really good book. And I think the most valuable tool out of that was the idea of the frog. There's always going to be on your to-do list one thing that will give you the biggest bang for a buck if you do it now and you do it well and you complete it. And so in one way, you could say, if you ask yourself from your to-do list, what is the number one thing that will give me the biggest bang for a buck, the biggest return on investment, will help me achieve the biggest results? What is it? Now, one second thing that I like to add to that is that when we'll look at another tool called the Time Management Matrix by Stephen Covey in a moment. But on there, it talks about what is called urgent and important. Urgent and important is what we call fires. Now, some people live in the whirlwind of fires, and they're almost like a fireman trying to put them out all the time. I would suggest if you're in that sort of situation, try to get out of it as soon as you can, because it's a recipe for disaster and a recipe for guaranteed burnout sooner or later. But let's just say that you've managed to plan your life and your business and your career a lot better, so you don't have too many fires. On your to-do list, it's going to be obvious that there's going to be certain fires jumping out at you. And there's this one that really jumps out big time. That is what Brian Tracy calls the frog. It's urgent and important. If you do it or you don't do it, there's large consequences, and you don't have the luxury of time to delay. That's what it is. It's urgent and important, and there's big consequences if you do them or you don't do it. So for example, what does that look like in our business? If you're in sales and your major client has just left you a very nasty voicemail because something ran really pear-shaped and they're like really losing their mind. And if you don't, let's say, get to it ASAP, they might go somewhere else. That could be a fire, right? Equally, Let's just say that you're an e-commerce business and your website is down. You don't have the luxury to wait 4 hours for that website to be back up and running if you're making, let's say, hundreds of thousands of dollars online that day or planning to, and it isn't working. So you get the gist. There's one thing that you just don't have the luxury of time of. It's got to be done right now at the exclusion of everything else. That's your frog. Now, imagine now, sometimes these things are not the prettiest things to do. For example, a frog, you wouldn't want to eat a frog that sits alive staring at you on the desk. It's the same idea. You know, you probably would at least want to fry it or boil it or something so that at least it's a bit more tasty and it doesn't keep like moving while you're chewing it. But the thing is, that's what fires are. Often they are not the things that light you up. They're not the most exciting to do. They're not fun. They're not entertaining. They're sometimes hard and difficult. Certain conversations have to be had, whether you like them or not. Sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and just own up to it that you or your team messed up and excuse and apologize to someone for it. Sometimes that's the frog. Guess what? A lot of people have a tendency to procrastinate on that one, even though, because they're afraid to do it. Fear is not a great decision maker. Fear is not a great advisor. Fear is not a great teacher. Fear is the one that you want to transcend and go beyond. Like Nike says, just do it. Even if it's fear, if it's frightening, you just do it, right? If it's important. And so the frog is important. It's got to be attended to. And so what most people find is that if they eat the frog, which is the most important thing in your list, the first thing in the morning, when you're fresh, well-rested, and full on energy, well, guess what? The rest of the day is going to feel like a breeze, and you can relax knowing that you've tackled the most important and the hardest thing on that list first thing, and you got it cleared, and it's 10 out of 10. When you know that, you don't feel guilty about having procrastinated on it, which too many people get caught in this sort of, I feel guilty because I didn't get to the thing that was really important because I was afraid to do it. Don't go there. That's for average people. Great people know what's important and they just eat the frog alive. So what's the number one thing? Even if it's hard, it's better to live on the lane of hard and necessary rather than what's easy and comfortable. That was number 5. Number 6 then is the ABCDE method. I've got to show you now the screen for a moment. Remember when I said the time management matrix where there's urgent and important? Well, guess what? There's 4 quadrants when you do the time management matrix, just as Stephen Covey said in his book, First Things First. At the top, you've got everything that is important. 2 quadrants are important. On the left is the urgent one, which is quadrant 1. On the right-hand side is the planning one, which is not urgent yet. Number 2. 1 is where the fires live. That's where your frog is. It's crises. It's also things personal. Let's just say that your spouse or one of your kids, was injured. Obviously, you got to drop everything and attend to them. That's all living in quadrant 1. Medical emergencies, pressing problems, deadline-driven products, last-minute presentations, crises, and the likes, and the frog, definitely. This is the stuff, like I said earlier, it's okay to spend some time on these things, but you don't want to get caught in a business cycle or a business routine where everything you're handling is crises, because it's a guaranteed recipe for disaster and burnout. If you do happen to be there, it means that you got to find ways to better structure your environment, because you can find ways to manage your environment in a better way so that you are more proactive rather than reactive. Reactivity is not good. You can only sustain it for a short-term period of time. It's almost like trying to, speed run 24/7. You can't keep it up. Like racing, you can't keep it up for a little bit more than 100 meters or so. So you got to be very strategic where you start racing. The number 2 is a really important quadrant. Quadrant 2 is where your planning lives. And I'm sure that Hamish and other financial planners watching this will really appreciate it. It's stuff that is important to get to, and where it's not urgent, but notice the magic word, yet. Sooner or later, all those planning activities will become urgent if you wait until the last minute. Imagine again when you went back to school and you had an assignment and you had 4 weeks to complete it. Some people started working on it religiously and set time aside over the next 4 weeks so that by the time crunch time was on, they'd be ready with it and it would have been well crafted. Other people left it until the last minute. And then they came up with something that obviously looked and felt like last minute. It wasn't really well thought through. And so everything has got good reasons. There's always a root cause that creates the outcome, a great outcome or a not so great outcome. And again, the more time we put into quadrant number 2, aka the more we plan our tasks and work our plan, the easier it is for us to become highly productive because we're focusing on what matters and procrastinate on what doesn't. This is basically called the quadrant of quality and personal leadership, whilst quadrant 1 on the left is called the quadrant of necessity. You got to do it. Now, obviously, the best and the most productive people spend more time on quadrant 2, followed by quadrant 1. Now, what are the other 2 quadrants now? Let's have a look. Quadrant 3 is the quadrant of deception. It appears urgent, but it's not important. And this is typical when somebody is trying to chase you with multiple emails or phone calls, trying to make you see that this is important, but really for you, it might not be important at all. It might be important to them though, because for example, they might try to sell you something and they keep chasing you for it, or they need something from you. Because without it, they can't go any further. And you got to really ask yourself the question, is this worth your time? So it's other people's problems in a nutshell. Try to avoid these things as good as you can. Number 4 is called the quadrant of waste. It's rubbish. It's trivia. It's busy work. It's junk mail. It's time wasters. It's viewing mindless TV shows. Now, I get it that sometimes you just want to watch something, but be mindful that you only dose this in small amounts and that you use most of your times really productively. With this being said, you got the 4 quadrants here. Once again, the ones that you want to avoid is the bottom 2. If you can free yourself up from everything that lives in quadrant 3 and 4, that in itself is already saving you time. I remember working with a business leader of a multi-million-dollar business who also happened to have 3 daughters and a wife. So he had also a life, but actually the business was becoming so inundating that it was actually creeping into personal time to the point that he was so flat out busy that he said, Bram, I need help. I helped him with time management, and it actually freed him 3 hours a day that he could instead choose to spend with his family. And it obviously has helped him a lot. So you can do the same. You can find ways to remove yourself from certain things that aren't important so that you have more time for what is important in your business life and your personal life. And that's really what it comes down to. Now, we've now already covered quite a lot. And I did mention that we would touch on number 6, which is the ABCDE method. Really important. On your to-do list, if you happen to have one, find ways to use A, B, C, D, and E across every task, rather than just putting it all on there. Now we're prioritizing. Knowing what your goals are in all 6 facets of life and the outcomes you want to achieve in your business and your life, then you go back to your to-do list and you start putting next to each one of your to-dos the letter A, B, C, D, or E. And let's just say that you come up with 2 A's, 5 B's, 1 C, 3 E's, oh, sorry, 1 A, 1 E, and 3 D's. Let me explain to you what they all mean. A is what we call the fires. Remember, quadrant 1, the quadrant of necessity, the stuff that is urgent and important. That's your A's. You don't want to have a lot of A's on your list. It means you got to do them now, and the consequences are big. So you got to get to them right now. So you would have maybe 2 A's. Then you think out of those two, which one is D number one, which is the frog? That one will become your A1. That's the one that you start off straight after your planning and stick at it until it's done. Next year, what you do is your A2. You do that one until it's done, and only then you move on to your B tasks. Your B tasks are in quadrant 2, where it's important, but not urgent yet. It's the planning quadrant, the one of quality and personal leadership, right? So that is where you want to put some time into it and you want to work your plan. This is where you just make sure that what you produce is high quality and it's going to get some really good results. Preparing for client meetings, new client meetings, is a B task, absolutely. Looking up their profiles on LinkedIn prior to going into a meeting is a B task, absolutely. Preparing good documents, researching them a little bit. If you happen to do your proposal, preparing for that proposal, visualizing the ideal outcome in your mind's eye and meditating on it, that's all B task. It helps you to reach good outcomes. There were just a few examples here. C is what you get to next. After you've done all of your A's and all of your B's in the right order, B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, there's no B's left. That's when you move to a C. What I call a C is a nice to. It's something to reward yourself for a job well done. Imagine that you had your 2 A's and your 5 B tasks, and you knocked them out of the park by 11:15 a.m. And now you say, you know what? It's time for me to do something for myself, just for me, for fun. Walking out in the park, smelling the roses, having a quick coffee with a colleague or a friend. It's just something that fills you up. It doesn't take a lot of time, 15 minutes or so, or making a phone call to a loved one, or something you just want to do for fun, reading a book. I don't care. As long as it's something that gives you something as like a pat on the back, that's your C task. And you only give it to you after you've done your A's and B's. Next is your D's and E's. D stands for delegation. Delegation is everything on your to-do list that someone else inside your business or outside of your business could do better for you because A, they enjoy doing it. B, they're better at it than you. They can do it faster than you. And you can pay them for it. And they're cost a lot less than you doing it instead. Better, smarter, all of that, cheaper is what you look for. So your VA is outsourcing. An external agency is outsourcing. Your team member that is a full-time or part-time EFT, it's delegation, but all of it is part of your D tasks. Look for ways, especially stuff that is repetitive, to basically handball it over to someone else that can do it better, faster, easier, and cheaper for you, especially if it is going on all the time. That should help you free up your time. Last is E. E for eliminate. Certain things on your list will be in quadrant 3 or 4. Those are the ones to eliminate. So if it isn't important enough to delegate or outsource, it's automatically by default E. That's all the stuff that you can just forget about altogether. Therefore, if you now look at your to-do list, A, B, C, D, E, there is your priorities. And you can only really choose what's important, what's not, if you're clear about your goals that you've written down in the personal present positive tense with a deadline to it. Only when you have that clarity of what success looks like in the near and distant future, do you know then what's going to be activities that will get you there sooner or the activities that will be taking you away from. That's where number 6 is coming in. Let's now move to number 7. Create large chunks of time for similar activities. We've kind of covered that one already, so I'll move over quickly. Number 8, schedule vacations and recharges a year in advance. I cannot stress this enough, especially for the busy bees amongst us. Business owners, business leaders that are just notorious workaholics, You got to find, or let's say, make time for yourself and your family and loved ones. Just because if you don't schedule it, you'll always find something else to fill the time with instead. By the way, I use the same technique for my clients. If I don't spend, let's say, allocate time for my best clients in advance in my diary, chances are that the year will go by and then I will reflect back at Christmas time thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't spend time with such and such person. It's important you think it out and you carve it out like stones in your diary. You fill them in first. Same with your team. When is the last time you brought your team together to create, let's say, clarity about what success looks like for the next 90 days? It should be a quarterly thing. Planning what's next and learning from the past, looking in the rearview mirror and looking ahead of you. That's a quarterly exercise. And once again, unless you schedule it, it won't get done. So schedule those things in advance. For you personally, schedule your 2 days recharges. I got clients that are business leaders that once in a while go and sit in a sweat lodge, or they go on a men's retreat or a women's retreat, or they go on something that really invigorates them. We personally do retreats mid-year in the tropics when it's cold in Australia. We go to a nice place and we work on how to grow an exponential business. This year we do that in Fiji. Last year we did it in Cairns because of COVID. But so these sorts of things are important, that you have you got a cadence of repetition, knowing exactly what's coming when at each point in time for you, your relationship, your family, your clients, your team. That's really where that comes in. You schedule it a year in advance. Number 9, then, we're almost there and you're doing a great job in hanging in there with me. Count your blessings before going to bed. All of us, we get busy. All of us sometimes have this, this mind that keeps racing and thinking, oh, I should have done this and I didn't get to that yet. And it just keeps us busy, even though we're meant to unwind so that we can have a really good re-energizing sleep. If that's the case, it's good to create a new habit, a success habit that allows you to sleep better. And how you do it is by just reviewing the day, count your blessings, either mentally and say, I'm grateful for this, and feel it in your heart. I'm grateful for that. I'm even doing this with my 9-year-old son, Liam. Before he goes to bed, I'll ask him as a guide so that he creates the habit himself. What are you grateful for, son, today? What are you grateful for? And the question triggers him having to come up with answers. And because he then starts not just thinking about what he is grateful for, I then also ask him, are you feeling it? Do you feel the joy connected to that gratitude? And if he does feel it, guess what? That's exactly where you want to be, because that gives you peace of mind. And peace of mind allows you to sleep better. Now, the best remedy, or the best almost medication to prevent illness, is a great night's rest. So if you're not having a great night's rest, make sure you do just this already, and it will work a treat for you. Dr. John Demartini, one of my, my heroes, says gratitude is the gateway to a loving heart. And guess what? We're all our better partners, spouses, fathers, moms, grandparents, siblings, advisors, providers, and so on, coaches, mentors, when we are connected to our heart, not just live in our head. And I think too many people in the Western world sometimes live too much here. And I'm the first to put my hand up that I sometimes am at the risk of that, which is why you need good practices to keep your head and your heart connected with each other, because that's ultimately what moves the needle with other people. A gratitude journal is another alternative. If you don't just want to think about what you're grateful for and feel it in your heart, you might just write it down, just like Dr. John Demartini does. Writing down, I'm so grateful for such and such. I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for that. You write it down. Last but not least, and then we go to Q&A. Number 10 is visualize and emotionalize your future, the one that you are working towards, aka the goals that you have. And you visualize it and emotionalize it as a done deal before going to bed. So while you do your meditation, your guided meditation, like the ones that I suggest you do with Ray Behan in the morning, 5 minutes before going to bed, when the lights are shut and you sit on the edge of your bed, what you could do is just close your eyes and go into some guided projectology and emotionalize it. So basically, I'll openly share with you, I have something that I visualize as the final scene by the end of June, meaning for Australia, the end of the financial year. I see myself sitting on a specific bench in a specific restaurant, surrounded by my wife and my son. We all wear a certain outfit. I can visualize it. I hear a pianist playing in the background in that same place. I can smell the smell that I can associate with that place. I see the beautiful foods that I enjoy having in that place. And I can see ourselves saying cheers to each other with a nice glass of mum from Tasmania. And of course, Liam with an apple juice. And it's going into really detailed projection of my future. And I live through it right now. And we're saying cheers because we know the results we've achieved by the end of the financial year. We know what it looks like. We know what it translates into exact dollar figures in the bank and what it helps us do. So there's a good purpose and reason why we are doing it. That's what I do every night. I do a second one where I visualize myself standing on a certain stage in a certain country, speaking to a certain number of people on a certain topic that I deeply care about and receiving a standing ovation. And I feel it already now, even though I'm working towards that thing. So this is stuff at the next level. It all helps you to remind you of what's important, to clear distractions and noise that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, so that you keep in front of mind what the prize looks like and that you're focused on what matters and can procrastinate on the stuff that isn't. I hope that you kind of see now where this could go. This and a lot more we, of course, do in our courses. Like, for example, Business Development Accelerator is definitely one that we do with business owners and BD people at the next level. But I hope that you got something here today from the 10 best practices in terms of time management that I shared with you. Once again, you have the PDF to access. And right now, we're going to open it up for a few minutes of Q&A. And I'm apologizing in advance that we took a little bit more time to go through the content. I clearly got carried away.